There's nothing like home, right? Well, depends. Depends on who you share your accommodations with. Sometimes we complain about housemates who don't wash the dishes or leave a mess in the common place. My case was a bit different. I lived with someone a bit more extreme than a lazy person. His name was James, and at the time he was 32 years old. A fat, balding guy that used to smell of pepperoni pizza. He'd been eating pepperoni pizza for months, the cheap frozen quality in packs of 3. Sometimes he would eat the 3 pizzas one after another and never brush his teeth. In fact, you could smell his breath from across the living room. He was a brilliant jazz pianist, and it was really cool jamming with him. I play guitar. The fun part, however, was only in playing music. Nothing else, as his head was often up in the clouds. There was a time where, here in England, magic mushrooms were legal, and in places like Camden Town, you would have been able to buy them almost anywhere. Even if they say the magic mushrooms are safe, any drug abuse leads to some sort of dementia in the end. Our house was a bit away from the transports of shops, so that most of people who rented a room didn't stay for too long, just for the time being until they had found a better place. Also, the house was a bit old, and smelly. However, this wasn't the only problem. The problem was James. He was annoying. He would constantly ask to borrow money from the tenants and leave a mess everywhere around the house. I learned how to deal with him. Like, if he would ask for money, I'd say, "Later, I'm going to the shop. I'll pop at the gas machine and get something." Then I would pretend to forget and find some similar excuses to avoid saying no. The rent was very cheap, and I would cycle everywhere I needed to go, so the location of the house wasn't a problem for me. Things started to take a wrong turn when a couple of girls moved into the house. He would walk around the house naked, just covered with a towel, and accidentally drop it whenever he would meet them, and he would just smile. The first time it happened, I laughed it off. Seeing the face of the girls totally embarrassed in front of this round, pink, bald, sweaty, hairless guy was too funny not to laugh at. But by the third time it happened, I started to feel really creeped out. It had happened a few times in the kitchen when I was talking to my girl housemates. He would just walk in, drop his towel, smile, try to make conversation, but we would just leave the room feeling uncomfortable from what we had just witnessed. It probably happened lots of times. I only saw it happening 3 or 4 times. That's not all. When the girls would literally run away when they saw him, he would chase them up the stairs and confess his love for them, which would creep them out even more. I can't imagine how disgusting it must have been for these girls to be tormented in this way. I'm not too sure exactly when I reckoned it was time to move out for me too, but on one occasion, while talking to my next door neighbor, a very nice elderly lady, she told me she saw him once dancing in the garden or doing some sort of ritual. He was completely naked, all covered in engine oil, wearing a pair of knickers on his head and singing some made-out Arabic song. I tried to reassure her, saying maybe he was doing a video, as he used to play a lot with an old Super 8 camera, but of course, I knew he wasn't doing any video. He probably was just out of his mind trying to scare the neighbors with his weirdness. That was something I couldn't excuse or even laugh about, and alarm bells started to ring in my head. He wasn't just a pervert, he was fucking crazy. He had a cat, and the cat used to bring little bunnies inside the house. Of course, the bunnies would have been hurt badly. That's just what cats do. They don't kill or eat them, they just play with these little creatures. I knew a vet that used to rescue bunnies for free. He had a garden full of them. But James seemed to love finishing the bunnies by snapping their neck off and dumping them in a field near the house. In the field, there was a playground of kids, so I imagined that some of the kids would encounter some of the dead bunnies while walking in the park. He also used to do stupid things like asking to borrow a lighter, light up his rolling cigarette, and pocketing the lighter right in front of the person he just borrowed it from. He was a complete embarrassment to have around, and a nightmare to live with. There are so many stories to tell. They all happened in a course of 10 months, so I was lost to the chronology of the events. Like the day I came back from the Glastonbury Festival and found him naked sleeping in my bed. I remember shouting at him to leave my room, but he wouldn't. I was so furious that I called the police before I would bash him with a metal bar of the scaffolds abandoned in the garden. But guess what the police told me? They told me, "You're both adults, you should be able to deal peacefully. So fuck the police." I started wrecking his room to get him out of mine, and it worked. Seriously, what would you have done? Cooking my own meal was also something to be careful of. I had to be present in the kitchen at all times or he would just spoon the food straight from the pot into his mouth when I wasn't there. Taking a bath after he did was also as disgusting as using the toilet after he had used it. You don't want me to be descriptive. You know very well what it's like to take a bath full of pubic hair and brown spots of God knows what, and you know how disgusting it is to flush someone else's feces. I now live on my own, and I have absolutely no intentions of sharing my flat with anybody.